Welcome, Knicks fans, to another episode of the Worldwide Knicks podcast. I'm your host, Omar, alongside fellow host Alex. One man down this week. Rafa is unable to join us this week, but he'll be back next week when we are previewing the playoffs. So that should be really fun. We're recording this right before the Knicks, or as the Knicks are playing a game against the Washington Wizards. If you can call them the Washington Wizards, all of their players of note outside of Alex's favorite, Johnny Davis, are not playing. So Wizard season's basically over there. So, Alex, how are we doing tonight?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, I'm on location in England. I've stepped across the border from Scotland, which
Enemy
yeah,
lines,
yeah,
Alex. You're in enemy
exactly. So
lines.
I'm invading from Scotland, and yeah, that's it. So yeah, it's good to be here. Obviously, I missed last week, and
Yeah.
hopefully nobody's celebrating out there. Us missing pod appearances in the same way that um, there's some celebration today when the RJ news came through. So yeah, that's good to
Yeah,
go. I'm on
yeah.
holiday, so
We're
which means I'm allowed to get the drink out, on a
Oh, there you
Sunday
go.
night. So
Perfect. Yeah, and
actually, just a note, because we missed last week, finally got my own whiskey bottled.
oh,
10 years in the making. This is it here. So yeah, really excited. So and tasted it after 10 years, and yeah,
hold
it tastes
on.
really
I
nice.
just,
It's
I
really
just, I
good.
just thought about something, Alex. Wasn't it recently the 10-year anniversary of Melo's 50-point game
There you
when
go.
he didn't shoot a layup and still scored 50? Was this idea born after you saw that magnificent display from Carmelo Anthony? That's what I
Oh,
need
must
to
have
know.
been. Yeah,
Must have
well, I
been.
remember. I remember actually when me and my friends went up to the distillery to kind of organize this whole thing. Just when I found out we had to put down about £600 each. Um, that suddenly the all sorts of phone signal and Wi-Fi capability disappeared when I had to phone the wife and tell her that I was taking this money out the family account. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there was no chance of being able to watch a Knicks game up there. There was
Right.
it was quite far north in Scotland where things like good Wi-Fi um, aren't exactly available. So yeah, it was a crazy weekend. I don't really remember much about it. A lot of whiskey was being drunk. So yeah, if you say that was the Melo game, that was the Melo game. So I'll trust you
Sure. There you go. Boom.
there.
That's awesome. Though. I know you've talked to me and Rafa about that before. So awesome that
Yeah,
you got it bottled up, which is awesome.
yeah,
We're gonna need Rafa to execute that trip to Glasgow, so you guys can
yeah.
toast some of that for sure.
Try and get over to New York sometime and get you a bottle as well. So
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, of course. Uh, like Alex mentioned, we missed last week, but we are back this week. So a little bit of a rundown here. So gonna take a moment to remember Knicks great and legend Willis Reed, who passed away recently. Julius Randle's injury. Gonna talk a little bit about that. About Knicks fans, kind of Alex alluded to it with RJ missing tonight against Washington. How they are kind of happy when our players miss games for injury or illness, and we'll close out talking on a high note about Isaiah Hartenstein, the Knicks backup center. While we were out, it's kind of weird. It was a tale of 2 weeks, right? 3-game losing streak with losses against the Wolves, the Heat, and the Magic, which had that now infamous, I guess, Emmanuel quickly Julius Randle verbal altercation or whatever, and a 3-game win streak, which featured another verbal altercation
yeah,
between RJ Barrett and Obi Toppin, with wins against the Rockets, the Heat, and a great win in a masterclass performance by Jalen Brunson in a duel against Donovan Mitchell against the Cavs. So up and down week. So the season's almost over. Playoffs right around the corner. If the Knicks win tonight in Washington, they actually do clinch a playoff spot, whether it's fifth or sixth, yet to be determined. But that is something you hope that they get taken care of against the Wizards B squad tonight.
mm,
But first thing we kind of want to do is just take a moment to reflect on the passing of Willis Reed. Of course, Alex, Willis played before our
Mm,
time, and
sure.
but he was the captain of the team that last won a championship in New York City. So, just I guess, what were your thoughts upon hearing him passing away?
Well, just being just the whole before our time. I mean, I'm a '70s child, so I'm from that era. But yeah, obviously, by the time I became a fan of the Knicks, then yeah, it was obviously past that time, and obviously it's incredibly sad. And I think that whole, with the 75th anniversary and everything, that whole team was um not 75th, 50th anniversary, sorry. That whole team is, at the forefront this year. And just it's incredibly sad. I mean, obviously, these guys can't go on forever, but and I know he'd been ill for a while. But just an incredibly important person to the franchise. He's obviously known as the captain. He's the co-leader. When you hear Clyde talk about him, it's just so many Clyde stories. The last few broadcasts and things have just been fascinating. Just listening to talk about him, the respect, everything about him. And yeah, I've just really enjoyed hearing the stories about him. You can only we all know the stories up till now, just the classic stories. Him coming out of the injuries, with the injuries, that is the obvious one. But just hearing all this other stuff from Clyde, it's just I absolutely love it. Just taking you back to those times. And you can tell obviously how much he loved him and respected him. And yeah, he's a sad loss. So yeah, there's not really much else I can say. He's just I say pretty much the center of the whole franchise. He might not have been the greatest player that we ever had, but he's probably one of the most important. So just center to the everything. So
Yeah, it's I was recently in New York and I was there for a Knicks game and attended a Knicks game against the Pelicans. And little did I know when I bought the tickets that was actually the 50th anniversary celebration. So, at
mm,
halftime, they brought out the old Knicks or family representatives from that team that were still around. Obviously, Clyde made a speech. They also had, some newer Knicks. They had John Starks there, Latrell Sprewell, Mari Stoudemire, and they were just all there to give this team their flowers, like people like to say, right? And that was a beautiful moment. Hearing what Clyde was saying was beautiful. This team from the '70s that won two championships with Willis Reed. This is a team that books have been written about, documentaries have been made about.
mm,
People love this team because it had so much variance to it. You had, you know, Clyde, this like enigmatic point guard from Southern Illinois. They trade for somebody like Earl Monroe, but then you had guys
mm,
like Phil Jackson and Dave DeBusschere and Bill
yeah,
Bradley, who were, but that whole team doesn't function without Willis Reed.
mm,
And it's sad and I guess ironic that both him and Bill Russell passed away this year. Two
mm,
titans of Northeast professional basketball in Boston and New York City, both who are from Louisiana, and both who really are probably some of the greatest centers of that era of the '60s and '70s,
mm,
in league history. And it's sad as a Knick fan. Like you said, obviously people are getting on in age. You expect that to
mm,
happen eventually.
mm,
How many times have we wondered, like, man, how much longer is Clyde going to be able to do broadcasts? We're thinking in
yeah,
that manner as well. But and you mentioned it, Alex. The thing that was really most striking about the whole thing was that game against Miami right after he passed. I believe that was a loss for the Knicks. And Clyde and Green, they did a really good job of weaving in stories throughout the broadcast. And they showed a video from Patrick Ewing, who's probably the greatest center, if not second greatest behind Willis, that the team has ever seen. And that made it special, right? Because you had a lot of those stories, like you hear about. I think the one that I remember right off the top of my head was when they were talking about going to Chamberlain's restaurant in Harlem, and that's like those are the three guys, right? The three big men of that era, Chamberlain,
Yeah.
Willis, and Bill Russell. Now all three of them are gone. Willis Reed was the last one, and of course he'll be remembered for, Game 7, against the Lakers and coming out hitting the first two shots, and just focusing on defense even while hobbled against the great Wilt Chamberlain. But what
Yeah.
people don't remember about that series is that he was incredibly dominant, and he was giving Wilt Chamberlain, one of the greatest players this league has ever seen, just giving him work, and
Yeah.
Willis was the type of guy. If you hear any NBA historian talk about him, no one ever had a bad word to say about him. So,
No.
yeah. So, of course, rest in peace to the captain.
Yeah. I think the stories that Clyde tells, and this is not just about Willis, but he often tells the kind of little kind of human stories, just little
Yeah.
silly little things, and that's I mean, because everybody's heard a lot of the stories 100 times, and he just gives those little tidbits of kind of personal stuff about him, and it's just like talking about picking him up from the airport, and he's always being late and all that kind of stuff. That kind of really brings home the kind of human side of it all, and really kind of connect with it rather than just hearing the same stories again and again and again. So I loved that, and you could tell that Clyde just wanted to talk all night about it, but
Then
as Clyde is, he's just got a way with words, and that's what
yeah.
he's known for, and yeah.
Then
Hopefully we've got a good few years left of Clyde. So
yeah, hope so. The thing that really was just like heartbreaking to hear from Clyde was at the end of the Miami game, where they kind of say, yeah, it was nice to relive the memories, but the pain for him starts then, when he really is going to start reflecting and thinking about his friend that he lost and all the times that they had together. And Clyde is never wavered. He always kind of attributes his success in everything to Willis Reed. He said that he taught him how to be a man, and
work
people
ethic.
like that when they're in your life, that's losing them is incredibly hard. Yeah, so obviously, condolences to the Knicks family, Knicks organization, and Willis Reed's family as well. And the year's only gonna get harder. As guys like Earl Monroe and Nick Barnett and Clyde Frazier get older.
Yeah.
But just gotta remember them while they're here. So yeah,
Yep.
rest in peace to the captain. His name is in the rafters forever. Knicks fans will never forget Willis Reed. So and everything he did for this team, especially he was the guy who brought them their last championship. So but let's move on into another kind of a sad episode here, man. We talk about annoying things. Julius Randle went down with an injury, man. The Mr. Iron Man, as we've kind of looked at him, has had an injury. When was it? It was against Miami, I believe. And yeah, he sprained his ankle to be reevaluated in 2 weeks, which has inserted Obi Toppin into the starting lineup for the time being. So a lot of fans, Alex, kind of talk about the needing to free Obi, quote unquote, and giving him more run. Do you think that this is kind of the chance he's been waiting for, albeit under unfortunate circumstances with his teammate going down?
I mean, sure, why not? I mean, yeah. I mean, it was really unfortunate what happened to him, and to be perfectly honest, I was hugely relieved when I heard the 2 week evaluation. I mean, sometimes you hear 2 weeks, and maybe coming from a soccer world where there's a game a week, and you think, oh, that's just 2 games, but you forget the 2 weeks in basketball is a lot, takes into account a lot more games than that. So. But I mean, the playoffs are 2 weeks away, so let him rest up, let him rehab, let him get back for the playoffs, hopefully. And yeah, I mean, it's just when it happened, you saw the pain he was in. You were just, as I say, glad that it's not more than 2 weeks. That it looked a real nasty one. So somebody who's suffered a lot of ankle injuries in their time. Yeah, I was just glad it wasn't broken or something like that, or some kind of serious ligament damage or anything like that. So, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's going to give him a chance to rest up. Of course, that's a good thing. Nobody wants to see him get injured, but and obviously the byproduct of that is that Obi gets some extra time. So although what I found really interesting was, and Tibbs admitted this before even the last game, was that, he wanted to see also some of these smaller lineups and, with Josh Hart and RJ and things at the four and, swapping between the four and the three. So that kind of thing really interests me, something that Tibbs has very rarely gone to in the past. So yeah, it's a chance to try out these things. Hopefully, it gives them extra options going into the playoffs. So yeah, I mean, I don't think he's suddenly going to start playing Obi 30, 40 minutes a night. He's just going to give him an increased role, a starting role, so a role against other starters, which is, I think, the most important thing. I think people talking about, just get him out there and give him loads of minutes and things like that. It's not important. It's can Obi play against these other, star power forwards, so starting power forwards. So he doesn't seem to have changed his role that much since he's. I mean, I know it's a very small sample size, but he still seems to be settling for, out in the corners, shooting threes, that kind of thing. So they don't seem to be trying to expand the game to Obi and trying to get him out in transition and playing post games and things like that. And we know certainly the post moves are not particularly a strength of Obi. So in that side of things, they aren't. Maybe once the playoff thing is locked up, maybe they will start to kind of experiment a little bit more with some of Obi's game. But I think certainly in the meantime, they just seem to be trying to get over the line and get that playoff position set. So,
I'm watching the way they're using him now. Obviously in spot relief after Julius went down against Miami and in starting against Cleveland. It really just reaffirms to me that they're probably going to move on from this guy. And, it's just he's not if they're going to continue with Thibodeau, and again, if they end up in the 5 seed and if they end up winning a playoff series or getting close to it, I don't think he's going anywhere. Eventually this guy's going to have to get another chance elsewhere, because this playing style that they have him doing, spot up kind of catch and shoot corner guy, maybe occasionally a guy who can run the floor in transition, it's not really going to be suited to him. So, I mean, you're seeing the way that they feel about it, because they're not, like you said, they're not giving him 30 minutes. They're trying Josh Hart and RJ as a 3-4 combo to see how that works. And to their credit, so far so good. You had some people kind of saying, "Oh, is this kind of like the Knicks version of the death lineup?" That Golden State made popular, years ago, and where you'd have like Brunson, Quickly, or Grimes, and RJ and Hart. It's like yeah, that sounds fun. That'd be interesting, and it just honestly, it's reaffirmed to me, one, like they really like what Julius brings, and two, they're probably going to move on from Obi. That's what kind of like this injury has showed me. Like if they're just featuring him the way they feature Julius, then that'd be one thing. But they're just kind of like, all right. It almost, I think John Macri brought this up on a post game recently, where he was just kind of like, yeah, they're kind of using him the same way they used Elfrid Payton a couple years ago. Get your 8-9 minutes in the first quarter, get your 8-9 minutes in the third quarter. And then we'll throw in our guys to close. And in this case, it's Josh Hart, as opposed to as it was Derrick Rose a couple years ago. So I think that's kind of that's accurate. And I wouldn't be surprised if he was gone in the offseason at this rate, man, because I think he's coming up on his rookie deal, being extended. I don't think they're going to extend him. I think the priority is extending Emmanuel quickly, as it should be. He's been incredible. And yeah, so you really hope
he does
Julius
have some value though around the league. I think,
I'm not saying he's without value. He definitely has value, and they need to cash in on that value next year, or this offseason, because, like I said, it's doing no good to have this guy here when he could be contributing on another team. A lot of other teams, I think. Like, imagine if he was like in Memphis. That would be a real interesting dynamic. Catching lobs from John Moran, team that likes to run. And I just feel like that's something that they need to look into, because it does not seem
Yeah.
like he is long for New York. Um, but
Indiana's long been rumored, with
yeah.
the link
Mhm.
up, the style that they play kind of would suit him a lot more. So that'd be an
Oh
interesting one.
man, how fun would that be? A team with like Halliburton and Matherin and
Mm,
Toppin. Oh man, that'd be a fun team. That'd be, I always like gauge like not so great teams to watch.
yeah,
Like, would I put them on a random Wednesday night on League Pass? And
yeah,
if you had Obi and Halliburton and Matherin, I'd check out an Indiana game or two.
yeah.
That would be interesting.
But just back with the kind of trading them in general, I think replacement wise, if they were to let him go, I think they'd be looking for a player in the similar mold of Josh Hart, and somebody
Yeah.
that could sit behind Randall, not going to be looking for starter minutes. Somebody that's defensively focused, doesn't care about the
Mhm.
box score, just guy that's going to come in and do the dirty work. That kind of player, I would assume. If you could have a bench of these guys that are just scrappy players that come in and do the business, then that's going to be ideal. I think the problem with Obi was that he's so focused on one end of the floor. He's like,
Mhm.
when you want somebody to come in just to give Randall a rest, then you're going to want to just hold the lead. You're not wanting that kind of style of play that Obi brings. So I think they're going to be looking around the league to see somebody that can kind of just be that piece, that can sit in behind Randall.
Yeah, it's kind of like when the Celtics acquired Al Horford. They brought him back for the
Mm,
second time. Just
yeah,
it didn't start with because they had Robert Williams, and they're like, here's this guy who has good effort on defense, hits a corner three, and is past his prime anyway, so he's not really looking like you said for starters minutes. So I think that's kind of the type of maneuver you're probably looking for is a guy who is comfortable in that kind of stretch four backup role, 15,
yeah.
16 minutes a night. And
And somebody that can play more than one position as well. I think
hmm,
that's as well as the defensive side, which is part of Obi's downfall. His inability to play more than one position. I think
mhm.
he's not a good enough rebounder to play the five, and he's too kind of slow,
It's a
kind of laterally.
defensive
I think
liability to be a three.
to be a
That's
three, yeah, he's going to get absolutely torched. So I think they need somebody a bit more. If you're looking for somebody to kind of come in and play backup minutes, then you need somebody that can kind of plug and play in different positions. So I think that's the main downfall of Obi. And it'd be sad to see him go. He seems such a great guy.
yeah.
He wants to be here. When him and IQ are in transition mode, just feeding off each other, it's just beautiful to watch. And he's just a victim of circumstance. And the way Randall's been playing this year, there's just absolutely no chance that he's going to get a big role. I think he would have been better concentrating in the off season, just trying to adapt his game and being able to rebound at a better rate, and he could have got more minutes at the five. And but then again, Hartenstein's come in and been fantastic as well. So
Yeah,
just
you
just
really would have
hard.
wanted him to adapt to being to getting minutes at the three. I mean, that's I
Yeah,
because we talked about it. You especially mentioned it earlier in the year, that we really lacked that depth at the three.
yeah,
Past RJ. So that
yeah.
would have been nice. I do kind of want to bring it back to Julius real quick. So him
Mm-hmm.
coming back from an injury right in time for the playoffs, which would presumably, as of right now, be against the Cavaliers. I mean, does the timing of the injury and the timeline of his recovery, is that a concern for you kind of going into the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, the reevaluated in 2 weeks.
Mm,
It does not mean obviously he comes back in 2 weeks. I mean, the kind of Iron Man mentality of Randall. You'd assume that he's not going to be long past that. So
mm,
if he's going to miss games, he's going to miss maybe one or two. I doubt he's going to miss that whole series. You would
yeah.
unless there's some kind of complication. So yeah, it's not too much of a worry. Although the team tonight are looking pretty dreadful so far. Yeah, I mean we do need him back as much as everybody says we don't. He's the focal point of our team, and there is something definitely missing when he's not there. So yeah, I mean, it is a worry in that respect. But I love the way that the team's adapted in this last week. It's been looking great. Several players have mentioned it in post games and things of just that next man up mentality.
Mhm.
That's what you need as a team. You're just like, we'll take your opportunity when it comes and go from there.
Yeah, it's funny. People saying, "Oh, well, we'll just be just fine without him." Blah 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 blah. And we're about to talk about this in a second, but um, listen, he's now a two-time All-Star with this team, and whether you like counting stats or not, it's still hard to replace 25 points a game, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists or 4 assists, excuse me, and yeah, you obviously want him. He's a big part of your offense. You're relying a lot more on Jalen Brunson when he's gone. I mean, we saw that against Cleveland. Obviously, Jalen was magnificent, 48 points,
Mm.
but he did have to take like over 30 shots to get it, and that's what happens when one of the guys is missing. When RJ's out, both Julius and Jalen take a lot more shots. When Julius is out, Jalen takes a lot more shots, and sometimes RJ as well. So you want him back, you want him healthy, especially if it's going to be a series against Cleveland. I feel like all those games have been pretty fun this year against the Cavs, and that
Mm-hmm.
would be a
Mm-hmm.
fun series, but be a much less fun series if Julius wasn't playing. So
Sure.
yeah, we're obviously hoping that he's back, and that way, you don't want to have the built-in excuse, right? You don't want to say, "Well,
Yeah.
one of our best players is out," blah 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 blah. You want to be able to go mano a mano with a great team in Cleveland, and see what happens. Let the chips fall where they may, so to speak. So that brings me to the next thing, which is, after Julius got hurt, people were like, "Oh, this is awesome." Now we get to see the team as I really wanted to see it. RJ misses tonight with an illness. So people in the you mentioned it, people in the comments like
Yeah.
taking victory laps or whatever. So why do we do this as a fan base, right? Like, why are we doing this? And like, when people say that they hate Knicks fans, this is the type of shit they're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, like, what's your takeaway on the way that some fans, I guess, have handled, our high money players, missing
Yeah.
action.
Well, I mean, I know that our Twitter accounts kind of faceless in it, and I know that 99% of the stuff that's posted on our Twitter account is from Rafa. But today I did have a moment of just lost it. I was like, I can't. As I said in my post, I said it's a section of the fans. It's not, and even then, it's a section of Nick's Twitter. It's not like a section of. It's a
Hmm.
tiny minority of the fans as a whole. Sometimes we forget that, and that we think that, and certain Knicks fans think as well that Knicks Twitter represents the whole fan base. It doesn't. It's a tiny part of it. And don't get me started on the ones that say, this is what I've been asking for, and Nick Tibbs has finally done it, and this is all because of us complaining. The front
Oh yeah,
office,
yeah.
the front office reads Twitter, and has obviously just changed tactics because of Nick's Twitter complaining. All that kind of stuff just drives me absolutely insane. But yeah, people celebrating injury and illness and things like that is just, yeah, real bottom of the barrel stuff. It's just pathetic. It really is, and whether you think it's because you're happy because it gives somebody else a shot, your favorite player that doesn't get games. Well, your favorite player should just work harder in practice and just not even give that, and give Tibbs, doesn't have an option but to play your favorite player, rather than, this goes back to the time of, the play the kids era where people were just wanting, all the minutes in the world given to people. That's not the way professional sports works. You have to earn it. You earn it in practice. You earn it,
Yep.
every day and with your attitude. And yeah, if it's just sad. I mean, somebody that's, yeah, RJ struggles at times this season. He's been really poor at times this season, but he's still a Knicks player at the end of the day. And if a Knicks player's on the court giving his all, which RJ always does, then celebrating that he's not playing is just pathetic, really.
You know, for so long, we had the Charlie Ward curse, and we would always say, "Oh, how come this team is incapable of re-signing its picks?" And granted, a lot of that was poor picks, but there is something to be said where like we drive people out of town sometimes,
Yeah.
and so RJ is supposed to be this like our guy, right? We drafted him with the third overall pick, and he turned into a 20-point per game scorer. That's pretty hard to do in the NBA. Just throwing it out there, or else or else everybody be scoring 20. So
Yep.
he's that, and then we re-sign him, and everybody's like, "Oh man, it's a pretty good deal." And we signed it for less than Tyler Hero got, and he got right in the range of DeAndre Hunter, and RJ's a much better player than DeAndre Hunter. This is what we all said in the offseason.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
he don't get me wrong. I've said this before. You said this before. His biggest fan, Rafa, has said this before. There's times where he's just frustrating to watch, right? Where the
mm-hmm.
shot you don't think is going in sometimes, and gets tunnel vision when he goes into the lane, not seeing the passing lanes, but he's still a super young player, and where to be happy that he misses a game, like what are you doing? Because this fan base seems to love young players before they get paid. They love quickly. They love
Yeah.
Grimes. Who are they always shitting on? RJ, Julius, Mitch. Jalen gets shit on for being a ball hog every now and then, which is ridiculous to me. Best point guard we've had in over 20 years, and all
Yeah.
of a sudden, it's it's a problem, right? But and it's just like, why are we kind of doing this? Okay, you prefer Obi Toppin because you didn't like Julius Randle's spin move. Like he's now been an all-star for your team 2 out of 4 years. He's probably going to make an all-NBA third team. So he's been an all-NBA player twice in 4 years. Like, what are we doing here? This is a team that is going to make the playoffs, one way or the
Yeah.
other. They're making the playoffs. And we're over here like saying, oh, see, if you would have listened to me and gone with this lineup, it would have been, it's like, what are we doing? Like, you want these guys to fail because you want to be right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like actually mentioning Randall, during the thumbs down times,
Mhm.
there was lots of people that said, "Oh, if he was just missing shots, that would be okay." But it's because of this is the reason that we're hating. Like that his attitude, his body language, whatever it was. If he was just missing shots, that's different. RJ is just missing shots, and they still complain. And it's just like, what is it? You've just made that decision, and we've talked about this many times. Maybe not in the pod, but certainly during text and things that it's a section on Knicks Twitter that just cannot admit that they're wrong. They choose a narrative, they choose a story, they've decided they don't like a player, and whatever that person does, as soon as they make a mistake, they jump all over it. And it's just like the vultures are circling, and it's just as soon as Randall has a bad game, bad games happen. Lots of people have
Mhm.
bad games. Stephen Curry has bad games. LeBron has bad games. And you're just like, you just have to admit that these things happen. It's nothing because of just maybe just things don't go right in a game. It's not a reason to suddenly turn around and think we need to trade this player. We need this guy's trash. This guy can't play. This guy's proven he can play. He's an all NBA player. He's a all star. We've got one of a great talent within the league, a great young player that's a 20-point scorer. This guy deserves the support. He's going to have bad games, but
What's killing me too is like, a lot of these fans too have kind of latched back on to the body language stuff with Julius especially, and with RJ a bit as well, where they say, oh, RJ's not celebrating when Jalen Brunson hit a three or some shit like that. Like, and like they brought up, we mentioned earlier the quickly argument with Randall right after he got the tech in Orlando. And it's just like we used to root for guys that did that stuff. Like we
yeah,
loved Xavier
exactly.
McDaniel and Anthony Mason and Charles Oakley and John Starks. We love these guys. The
Yeah.
90s Knicks, everybody fantasizes about the 90s Knicks, right? But when we have a guy who's fired up like that, all of a sudden it's a problem. Why is it a problem? Because you decided, after his first season that you hated this guy, and he wasn't KD and he wasn't bringing you a championship and he wasn't this, that, and the third.
He's not
Newsflash,
perfect.
yeah, exactly. Newsflash, he's probably going to be pretty close by the time he's done with as a Knick in the top 10 of a lot of statistical categories. So he's probably going to be a top 15 Knick of all time. I just embrace that. RJ Barrett is probably, if he rides out his contract here and even signs one after that, he's probably going to be in record books as well. So, you holding them to this kind of standard that you have because, you wanted them to do something differently, it's just kind of ridiculous to me, and I just, again, it's like, it's why people on Twitter make fun of us. It's probably, it's shit like that like national people, they mention that all the time. It's like, oh, I know Knicks fans are going to hate to hear this, blah, 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 blah. And they're kind of right. Like, we're dealing with a fan base that's kind of being petty and bitter when this team is pretty close to 50 wins. Like, what are we doing now? Like, it just makes no sense to me.
Well, I've obviously not had the opportunity to speak about Tibbs too much in the last while. But it's the same perspective. Like, people were expecting him to be perfect. And despite his experience, he's not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Like, you watch the Miami the last few weeks. Spo, who's supposedly one of the best coaches in the league, makes lots of mistakes. And poor rotations, bad out of timeouts. These things happen in the flow of the game. It happens every single game. No coach is perfect, and just holding coaches up to or players up to that kind of level is just is getting ridiculous, and it's just it's just so frustrating, really. Today just kind of final straw kind of moment. So I've just like wanted to unload a few on Twitter. So
yeah. And so let's pin that, because that's a depressing conversation about some of these Knicks fans. And let's kind of close out the episode on a more positive note. And that's been
which we
the
should
play
be,
of,
as you said, we're near 50 wins. Like we
exactly.
should be talking, about the amazing wins against the Heat and the Cavs, and this should be a positive time.
But here we are.
Here we are getting beaten by the Wizards B team. So back to reality.
That's all good. But let's talk a little bit about backup center Isaiah Hartenstein, who's really turned it around. You remember months ago, I was saying specifically, as I get this guy off the team, what's he doing? He has a liability out there. He's quickly transformed himself into an excellent passer, great defender, as a backup center. And, some Knick fans saying that he's the best backup center in the league right now. I'd have to kind of reevaluate that to see what other backup centers are out there, but he is definitely
there's not that many, to be honest. I mean, with so many teams playing small ball that now
true.
a lot of teams come in from the bench units with smaller lineups.
I would say Naz Reid probably holds that right now for Minnesota. That makes sense.
If he's not the best, he's certainly
up there. He's up there. Yeah. So, and he's even to the point now, he's been closing a lot of these fourth quarters. Tibbs has, earned Tibbs' trust to be out there with closing lineups. So now what he's become, do you think that he's kind of now the player that we were expecting when we signed him in the offseason?
A little bit. I mean, I think a lot of the hype about him was about the shooting, which is not really come about. And actually, if you look at the numbers, he wasn't that great of a shooter. He had very low volume. So, I mean, he can obviously shoot the ball, but it was never, particularly, elite at shooting from that position. But what he did come as advertised was an excellent passer, and I think that his role has changed in the last few weeks, month or so, where he's playing more at the kind of point of attack, and some of his passing has just been exceptional, and it really opens the game up. Just having a center that can stand at the top of the key and just be a threat, and defenses have to pay attention to him, and often that what that does is it opens up for cutting players and cutting play. You've seen so many times, he finds players like open under the basket, and that's because you can't just leave him. When Mitch is up there, people know that all he's going to do is dump off the ball to somebody else, and he's
Mhm.
not going to be a threat for a pass under the basket or something like that. So because Hartenstein has that threat, it's brilliant, because what we said at the start of the season was this is a guy that's replacing Noel. Noel was just a carbon copy of Mitch, basically, and
Mhm.
and
With worse hands.
yeah, well, yeah, the whereas this guy was going to come in and give us something different, and if we needed a game where we needed a center that had more of a threat from outside, or had a more of a threat from a passing positions and things like that, that could, it's situational points in games and things where we just needed something a little bit different. That's what we needed, so that's what we were excited about in the start. So from that respect, yeah, I think he has lived up to the hype. So, and I think, there was rumors that, early in the season he was playing with injuries and things that were hampering
Yeah.
his game, but he's admitted himself, he was just playing
No
poorly. And
excuses. Yeah.
yeah, and I love to see that as well, guys that are not coming out with excuses. And a lot of the reason that we were hating on him a little bit was, what he was doing was basic errors as well. It wasn't like if he was just missing shots, or he was just playing, but he was still playing hard. He was just but he was making basic mistakes. He was like turnovers and things which were just so frustrating. He was
Yeah.
missing shots around the rim and stuff like that. Real easy layups and things. So he's tidied all of that up now, and he's really worked hard. So it's so great to see that he's going to put the work in and turned the season around.
You know, when we got him, I thought, okay, I fell into the whole, we got to stretch five,
Mm.
thing. And, you see the 3-point percentage before you notice the volume, and you kind of sell yourself on that. And
Mm.
in the first half of the season, he was far below my expectations, and I was real disappointed. But now I honestly feel like he's exceeded my expectations, because he's proven himself as a guy who can hit like a little mid-range push shot type thing from the paint. Which gives you a nice alternative to what Mitch offers you. But he's been much better than I anticipated as a defender, especially lately. And
Mm-hmm.
I know he was a good passer. I didn't think he was this good, so that's been a revelation to me as well. And yeah, he's been great. The chemistry ever since Josh Hart came on board between them two,
Yeah.
especially on the back cut game, where he's able to find him with just these precision passes, is incredible. He has good chemistry with Deuce in that respect as well, and he's just done incredibly well. And I think the important thing is that he's a great complement to what you get with Mitch. Both pretty good rebounders. Mitch obviously is a better rebounder, especially on the offensive side. Mitch
Mm-hmm.
is an elite shot blocker, but you don't have a super far drop off with Hartenstein. And he can expand the offensive game. So it's not like you said where Noel was a carbon copy of Mitch. So teams knew how to scout the centers for the Knicks. You have to scout two different ways, play two different ways when these two guys are in. And I
Yep.
think, his ability to find the open man is why he's gotten crunch time minutes lately. Do I think that means that Mitch is never going to get crunch time minutes? No, I think if we're in a series with Philly, we see Mitch late in the fourth to guard Embiid. But that's
Yeah.
the beauty of a guy like Hartenstein, is that you get that matchup versatility, that you can do much in the way they have it in the backcourt between the rotation of Grimes, RJ, Quickly, and these guys. You now have it up front where you could say, hey, if I have this matchup that is better suited for somebody like Mitch, who's going to be guarding inside, we're going to put him in. If I got a matchup where Hartenstein might be a little bit better, especially on the offensive side, we're going to use him a little bit more. So it's nothing but a good thing. Everything that we hoped for and more at this point, and getting good at the right time, right? Right before the playoffs, you're going to need him to really be that anchor in the second unit, down low. So I'm real happy to see it. I think this team, we've said this before, if not on the pod, then, just like you said, via text, as this is a team that's much more talented than the one from 2 years ago. And one of those reasons is, as much as we love Taj Gibson, he is much more talented than Taj or Noel, were 2 years ago. And I'm hoping that we get to see that in the playoffs, especially against Cleveland, with a kind of a weak, with a little bit of a weak bench, right? Where he should be able to manipulate and take advantage of some matchups there.
I couldn't even name you who the Cavs backup kind of center power forward was. No idea.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're so top heavy. I mean, their starting five is great, and then once you get into the bench, you're looking at Cedi Osman, you're looking at Rubio. Those are the kind of players they got off the bench, which are like Lamar Stevens, I think, would be in their front court. So
of course,
okay players, but they're not great NBA players, and those are matchups that guys like Hartenstein and Josh Hart should be able to take advantage of. If that series comes to pass.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I think my concerns, as we've talked about yesterday, about that matchup, but I think we'll save that for next week's pod when we've actually hopefully got there and
yeah, we could talk about it this week, and then ends up a series against Philly, and then we're like, whole different thing. But let's
next one again, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, they're hanging around. I thought they would have dropped into the play-in, but they've Mikal Bridges has been great. He's been incredible. All right. So let's wrap up this episode, talk about some games. So the last 4 games of the season, Alex. So we're currently underway against Washington. Then we have a home game against Indiana. A road game against Indiana, a road game in New Orleans, and then closing out the season at home against Indiana. So 2 matchups with the Pacers this week. What do you got the team going?
I mean, obviously, it was 61-53 down at the half, which is really disappointing. The Kispert guy, who I can't stand him, but he's just one of these guys.
The headband? Is it the little headband?
Yeah, it's just the kind of he's just one of these guys. He's like born to be a Knicks killer, like just so annoying. But I'd hope for kind of 3-1 out of that at least. The Pacers, although are kind of very up and down, like Washington tonight, are starting to really drop a lot of players. So hopefully they're in full on tank mode by that point. The Pelicans might be still hanging about, trying to get into the play-in. So I'll go 3-1 then out of those 4.
Yeah, I agree.
We'll come back today.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think we'll come back against Washington and pull out the W. New Orleans, I think, could be a loss because they're going to be fighting for their lives to stay in the play-in race. The West is just
kill our draft pick for this year.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, with how disappointing, man. The Mavs, you can't even make the play-in. Like of the lowest of bars, and you can't even make the damn play-in. Yeah, it's just unbelievable.
Again, I mentioned to you the other day, I don't like people taking kind of victory laps about things, but that's one I predicted was that was going to be an absolute disaster. That Kyrie to the Mavs, it's a horrible fit. They've got absolutely nothing else behind that as well. It's just,
I think I mentioned this to you guys before. Like, there's an argument to be made that in the late Dirk to now early Luka era, the Mavericks front office has just made blunderous move after blunderous move after blunderous move. And they've really just it reminds me of LeBron's first go around in Cleveland, but worse. At least LeBron was transcendent enough to be able to carry that team into a top 4 seed in the East, and they're about to miss the playoffs with what some consider it's indisputed a top 5 player in the league. And usually if you have a top 5 player in basketball in his prime, you should be able to make the playoffs, and not even just the play-in, just the actual playoffs. And it's been an unmitigated disaster since Kyrie got there in Dallas.
I mean, if Kyrie walks, then I think they're going to have a real struggle to put any kind of decent team together before, Doncic gets to his next decision. You
Yeah,
know,
I
where
mean,
the whole thing could come crashing down.
they brought in Porzingis to kind of be like his number two. That doesn't work, so they ship him out, and then they fumble the bag with Jalen Brunson. Then what do?
Mhm.
They bring in Christian Wood, who is a whatever player, and then they trade for Kyrie, who very might well walk and sign with the Lakers in the offseason.
Mhm.
And, it becomes a situation where you're just kind of like, man, like if you're Luca, eventually, like at what point is enough enough? I know there
Mhm.
isn't really a reputation of European players requesting trades like that, but he could be the one who wants out, because if I was him, I'd be pretty mad. I'm supposed to be this guy. I am this guy. And,
Mhm.
I'm not, I look around, I see Embiid has Harden, Giannis has Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton, LeBron has AD, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander has a bunch of young, interesting players with him. And who do I have?
Yeah.
Tim Hardaway
I
Jr.,
mean, the, the last player that Doncic needs around him right now is Kyrie. Do you know, like he
Mm,
needs proper defensive players to cover up for his deficiencies at that end, and plus guys that could, 3-and-D players, do you know, which aren't easy to
you know
find,
what?
but
The irony, Alex, is if the trade never happened on draft day or draft
mm,
night, and you plop Luca on the Hawks,
yeah,
that's interesting. You'd have Capella, you
yeah,
got DeAndre Hunter, really good wing defender.
yeah.
You got John Collins, who can defend at times, and
I mean, you
that would
saw
be a much
yourself.
better fit.
Well, we saw ourselves 2 years ago how they can hide one of the worst defenders in the league. Do you know, in Trey, that they were that capable from that side of things. So yeah, they
It's
could
just
have done the same
ironic
with him for
to
sure.
to think about it. They never make that trade, and
Yeah,
and Luca's a Hawk. Like how much different does the East look right now?
no,
It's
no,
just interesting to think about. But
yeah,
one to think on. I hate to end the podcast talking about the Hawks and the Mavericks, but here we are.
yeah,
So
yeah.
all right, so that's gonna wrap up another episode of the Worldwide Knicks podcast. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at WW Knicks Podcast, where, as Alex mentioned, 99% of the time, Rafa's hitting you with his thoughts, but every now and then one of us kind of jumps in as well. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, turn on notifications for that. Also available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts. So until next week, Alex, Omar, checking out Worldwide Knicks. Rafa will be back next week, and we'll see you guys then.